There's a lot I know about the real estate industry. I've been a realtor for 20 years and have seen, the evolution of real estate. When I first started working in real estate, the people that I was working with had been around since the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I got to learn from them. And then I've seen a lot of change in my real estate career. Markets going up and going down. Technology and how that's changing the game. So I have a lot of experience going back and seeing, and success in good markets, success in bad markets. And I've seen, again, like technology come in and make changes. But the one thing I haven't seen change and that really needs to change is the way that realtors get paid, right? That's something that's stayed the same forever. So to go back, and there's some other things that need to be changed about the real estate industry too. I mean, this is really important stuff. Like if you're listening to this right now today, like you need to hear this and you need to share it with your friends. Anybody who's a homeowner, a home buyer, if you have a kid that wants to own a home someday, like there's a lot going on in the real estate industry right now that you need to hear about. Going back, let's just take a quick history lesson. So back in the early 1900s, the same time that the assembly line is being created by Henry Ford and the Model T is in production, this is when kind of the modern real estate industry was born. And back at that time, and all the way up through the 1980s, this is going to sound really strange, but you could always have an agent that's working with the buyers, and of course you had an agent that's working with the sellers. But both those agents, up until like the mid 80s, were technically both working for the seller. They owed their fiduciary responsibility to the seller. Okay, now in the 80s that changed, and that was a great change in the real estate industry. And so now the listing agent represented the seller alone. Okay, that's how it should be. The seller had their representative, and the buyer now had their own representative that's representing the best interests of the buyers. Okay, but the problem was the tradition of the seller still paying for both the buyer's agent and the listing agent remained. Okay, so that hasn't changed, all the way up until today, right? So now, based on what's happening in the real estate industry, there's been at least at last count 21 commission-based consumer lawsuits against the real estate industry, right? And guess what? They're winning. They're winning because the way that we've been doing real estate up until this point has not been the most consumer-friendly way to do it. Now, don't get me wrong. The real estate industry in the United States, I've been a part of it for the last 20 years. It's, if not the best in the world, it's on par with the best in the world. We have a really good, it works. It works for people. The problem is it could work better. And that's where the industry has failed you, the consumer, over the years, right? So we need to come up with a better way, a more transparent way, a more cost-effective way. We need to bring more value to the consumers than we have in the past. If we had been doing that, we wouldn't have these lawsuits that we have today, okay? It's because we have not done a good job of providing the amount of value that we are requiring based on the pay that we need. In the 80s, there was this separation. So the sellers represent the sellers, buyers represent the buyers, but the seller's still paying for both of those. Now, because of these lawsuits, that has changed. Okay. Now you won't hear this. That's why I'm here talking to you today, because as an industry, we're not just shouting from the rooftops that things have changed. And as an industry, we kind of like to hold on to things that we already have, which ultimately end up being inflated fees for service, right? So what's happened is that now there's another separation. Besides the one that happened in the 80s, now the separation is the sellers pay for the seller's agent. The listing agent is paid by the sellers, and the buyer's agent is the responsibility of how much the buyer's agent gets paid is on the buyers, and that's where it should be. Now, there's ways that the buyer's agent can get paid through, within the transaction that makes sense. Like the seller might end up paying for the buyer's agent at the end of the day. But we're starting off by saying, as a seller, we're not offering out any commission to the buyer's agent. How much that buyer's agent gets paid should be discussed and determined between the buyers and their agent. So the buyer's agent and the buyers need to determine what their pay is. As a seller, how do we know what value that buyer's agent brings? We don't know if they've been in the business for one day or 20 years. We don't know if that buyer's agent sold one house or 0 houses or thousands of houses. So why is it on the sellers to determine the pay of that buyer's agent? It just shouldn't be like that. It doesn't make any sense. So that is now changed, and that's a huge deal for consumers. It's making the transaction much more cost effective. It helps buyers and it helps sellers. The whole goal of like transforming real estate is to have a more open, honest, and transparent transaction. And we start by separating out who's paying who, right? So now we understand that the sellers are responsible for paying the listing agent and the buyers are responsible for what their buyer's agent gets paid. Okay, that's a huge deal, huge cost savings. As a first-time home buyer and you're interviewing agents or whatever, it doesn't have to be a first-time home buyer. Any home buyer that's going to be working with an agent, like you can kind of think of it like a hairstylist, right? This is like a simple explanation of why this should be changed. If you go to a hairstylist that just started out, they charge a certain fee, right? A lower fee. Now, a lot of people will want to go to those people because they want to save money, and hey, they're willing to take a risk that they could really jack up their hair and make a huge mess. But they feel like what they're paying is what they want to pay, and they're okay with the service that they're getting there. Now you have, on the other hand, you have a hairstylist that's been doing this for 20 years, that owns his own business. He's going to charge a way different rate than the first-time person because he has experience. It's known what he can do. That people already understand, and he has a track record. So that hairstylist deserves a higher fee. Okay, so that's all we're saying in real estate is, as a seller, I have no idea what that buyer's agent's doing or how much experience they have. But traditionally, we've always just been giving them 2.5%, to do their job, and without ever knowing anything about them. So that has changed. Okay, so that's the first big thing. Now let's talk about like the transaction itself. Okay, and there's a couple of things that need to change as far as how the transaction is done. And I'll start with the first one. Okay, I've never understood this. The way that real estate works in general is you're looking for a house, you find an agent, you start looking at homes, you pick a home that you want, then you start negotiating on that home. Okay, so you are determining, based on being in the house for maybe an hour, you're determining what you're going to pay for it, what kind of earnest money you're going to put down, who your attorney is, what kind of lender you're going to get, and you're negotiating. The main thing is the price of the house. Okay, so after you get done with all of that negotiation and you turn in your earnest money and you sign the contract and you're locked into this deal, at that point, you get to go and take a peek under the hood and have a home inspection. Okay, that to me has never made any sense. So let's move the home inspection to the front of the transaction. Okay, this, again, we're talking about transparency and openness. Let's let the buyers understand what they're buying. Okay, so as a seller, we have this home inspection done. Say there's 20 items that need to be fixed. Okay, so you can fix them. like I want to transfer a good house to the next person. So I'm going to fix those things that come up, and then we're going to present the buyers with a clean home inspection report. Or as a seller, I can see this happening in 20 years and I sell my home. I'm like, I don't want to fix anything. I just want to sell it. Fine. But at least give them the information about what's wrong. They're going to find out anyway. Let's give it to them up front and then negotiate the deal based on the known condition of the house, how it actually is. Okay, it just makes everything so much simpler. The most real estate deals fall apart in the first 5 days after the contract is executed. Why? Because that's when the home inspection's done. Okay. And after the people see the home inspection, a lot of people just run, or a lot of the negotiations start up all over again. I mean, it causes an intense amount of stress, and it's not really necessary. Okay. So we're going to do our best to make this industry better by moving the home inspection to the front of the process. Okay. Again, we want open, honest, transparent. That's what we're looking for. Okay. The second thing is the list price of the home. Okay. So when you work with me, we're going to determine the best list price of your home the way that everybody does it. Okay. We take your house and we look at the other houses that have sold in your neighborhood, and then we compare your house to each one of those. Okay. And by comparing your house to each one of those, like we're going to add or subtract value to those sold houses. And that's how we come up with a range of value. Okay. So we're going to do that just the same as we always have. And between myself and my sellers, we're going to determine a range of where we think this house is going to sell. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hire a licensed third-party professional appraiser to come in and give an independent value for your home. Okay. Now, and that's what we're going to use to base the list price off of. Okay. Again, we're not changing how we're doing things. We're just standardizing how we do it. We're trying to make everybody feel very comfortable about the condition of the home and the price that we're asking for the home. Now, it's really important to note that the list price is just a starting point in a real estate transaction. Okay. The list price is just where we start. As we've seen over the last 3 to 5 years, we set a list price and people come and look at it and multiple people bid, and the house ends up selling $10, $30, $50, $100,000 over what we listed it at. Now, does that mean we were terrible at what the listing price was? No. But real estate's really good at determining value. And because it's been a hot seller's market and inventory's been low over the last few years, homes are selling above list price. Now, I'm old enough to remember what a buyer's market is like. And in a buyer's market, we set a list price and the offers come in 30,000 below, 20,000 below, 10,000 below. So again, the list price is just a starting point for what we're talking about. It's the real estate market itself is going to determine the value. But what we're trying to do is standardize how we came to that list price. And that's what's going to give buyers much more comfort. So now you give buyers a good reason for why you listed the house where you did. You're giving them all the condition of the house in a real way by having the home inspection report. We're making it easier for a buyer to come in and buy that house. Now, that not only benefits the whole transaction and makes it much simpler, but it also increases the chances that we might have to pay a buyer's agent at all. The buyers feel very comfortable coming in and purchasing this house. Or at the very least, without as much work put into it, perhaps those buyers with their buyer's agent negotiate a lower commission than we would have normally paid, and that can save the buyer's money. It saves the seller's money. It saves the buyer's money, saves the seller's money. It's a more open, honest, transparent transaction, and that's how we change real estate. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, please contact me today. Let me explain all of this to you and how it affects you and how we should do real estate in 2024 and beyond.